Broadcasting live from somewhere in the great upper Midwest and beaming directly to you worldwide. This is Night Talks Radio.
Want more Night Talks? We have you covered. Check us out on Facebook and Twitter at Night Talks Radio for bold and truthful commentary, breaking news, show updates, program guest information, and so much more. And hey, thanks for listening.
What's your story? What's your sign? It's like we're twin flames in a different life. Deep connection lights a spark. It's like you know me in the depths of my heart. We're dreamers. Don't care what other people say. We live it like this could be a final day. We're dreamers. Don't care what the others say. We're doing this in our way. We come alive in the nighttime. It's something about how we dance in the moonlight. That look in your eyes, it tells me that you want me and all my loving. We come alive in the nighttime. You and I, we come alive.
Streaming to you live from Spreaker.com and somewhere deep in the great upper Midwest. If you're ready for a ride, you can call NTR anytime by dialing the nationwide caller line at 1-507-384-9390. First-time callers can reach Night Talks Radio at 1-507-307-4424. Text Daniel and NTR exclusively at 1-218-689-7126. Now, from somewhere in the great upper Midwest, here's your hosts, Daniel Brewer and Jennifer Gregerson.
We're doing this in our way. We come alive in the nighttime. It's something about how we dance in the moonlight. That look in your eyes, it tells me that you want me and all my loving. We come alive in the night.
From the great upper Midwest, coast to coast and nationwide, around the world online, this is another edition of Night Talks Radio, Season 2, the Summer Night Series, to be perfectly exact. And with that said, this is Episode 2 of Season 2, the Summer Night Series. Before I begin on this absolutely gorgeous Sunday evening in the great upper Midwest, as always, I have the beautiful and gentle and kind-hearted Jennifer Gregerson co-hosting, as per usual, a major part of the show, as I have said several times, and very much appreciated. Moving on, we have an excellent show for you here tonight on NTR, which of course was supposed to happen yesterday, but that fell through. And then we were also supposed to have a doubleheader today. So actually, Stephen Ward was supposed to be earlier today, if not last night. And Philip, UFO abductee, was supposed to be the show that is about to happen now. But unfortunately, Philip is sick and has been getting sick for quite some time, but it has gotten really bad, apparently, to the point that he cannot come on the radio as well. Very similar to last weekend when we had a sick guest, Jennifer Alvarado's husband, who also could not come on the show. So we had to do some juggling around, but eventually we have figured out that we can have a show this way, tonight, Sunday night, with Stephen Ward, which of course is still going to be a blast, folks. We'll have Philip back sometime in the future, but tonight it is all about Stephen Ward. Steve was born and raised in in my home state of Michigan, he began his fascination about the unexplained from the swamp gas UFO incident and the mysterious sighting of the Mothman creature. From then on, Steve devoted his career into researching the Mothman, and with the guidance of his mentors, he continued to look more toward the paranormal explanation through conscious manifestation. A U.S. Navy veteran, Mr. Ward has been involved in the Mothman Festival as a tour guide, a regular speaker, and host of his very own podcast for 3 years. Now on the Paranormal UK radio network called The High Strangeness Factor, and has been a correspondent for 5.5 years on Mac Maloney's Military X-Files radio show. So tonight on NTR, Steve will share with us his research about the Mothman, other cryptids, and the theory about mind manifestation and transmigrification of energy. And of course, much, much more. That and a brand new NTR new music now with the Darren Holland Project. Folks, it's going to be a great show tonight. Stick around. It's a beautiful Sunday night in Upper Minnesota. And speaking of high strangeness, we've got some coming right at you, folks. So sit back, relax, and enjoy Mothman Confidential with Stephen Ward on episode 2 of NTR Season 2, the Summer and Night Series. We'll be right back. Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand new edition of Night Talks Radio. Sunday night edition, that is. Episode 2, Mothman Confidential with Stephen Ward. This is going to be a great show. We were supposed to have it last night, of course, but that fell through, unfortunately. And we were then supposed to have him this afternoon, this Sunday afternoon, and that fell through due to an illness that another guest had. So Stephen has finally fallen into the time slot, 9 p.m., which is the regular time slot that we have here on Night Talks Radio. And we're going to have a great show, I guess. Is that true, Jen?
Yes, that is true.
It's finally going to happen. I did not think anything was going to happen this weekend, to be honest with you. Knowing our equipment, the home studio, the weather, just a multitude of factors here at NTR. But those things will be getting better, of course, as time goes on. But as you know, if the wind blows the wrong way here,
yeah,
the internet is out for about 45 days.
Yeah, right.
So it can be troublesome. It can be a problem. But this time again, it was because somebody was sick. So we can't really blame them.
No, but the thing is, Daniel, we woke up this morning, and we had a tornado that had touched down already in Brooks, Minnesota, which is only, maybe 35 miles away from us?
I literally could walk to Brooks.
Wow.
I mean, but not only that, you were passed out. Okay, everybody was sleeping. I'm up.
I heard the Noah go off.
Well, you heard the Noah go off, yeah, sure. But I watched the cat. We have a cat, of course, who is very similar to Garfield from the cartoons. He looks exactly like him. I'm surprised he doesn't have a thing of lasagna that he carries around 24/7. Biggest cat I've ever seen in the world. He's our cat. But
right.
Anyhow, he started doing that. something's freaky going on outside.
Perking his ears?
Yeah, how he does that quick, fast walk away from the window, and then he stops and he looks with his ears up, and then he moves again really fast. Then he stops and he looks, and I said, well, there's something up. And then 2 seconds later, Noah goes off, tornado warning, and the cat, he was out of there. He said, I'm not dealing with this shit. So he got
it's
there,
just,
but
it's never ending.
Never ending around here. It's always something. But the joyous part of tonight is that we have Steve with us tonight. Steve, are you there?
I am here.
Hey, how's it going, my friend?
Very well.
Very well, awesome. So, we are here to talk about the Mothman, first and foremost. And then there's a multitude of other things that we're going to discuss as well that you are quite knowledgeable at. And you were in the Navy, correct?
Yes, I was.
I want to thank you for your service as well. I wanted to get that out of the way immediately.
Yes, thank you very much, Steve.
Absolutely.
Oh, my pleasure.
Excellent. And Jennifer, it looks like you want to kick things off here with Steve.
I do. Steve, can you tell us where you are from and what you do today?
Well, I grew up in Michigan. And,
awesome.
I grew up around the Detroit area, but I had been living just east of Battle Creek for a few years.
Wow.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
okay.
I don't mean to cut you off there, but my gosh, we were right next to each other, literally. I mean, pretty much. I was in Wayne, Westland, Livonia area. Yeah, it's still a little bit of a distance, but I mean, in the whole big scheme of things, we were pretty close.
Well, I used to work downriver in Wyandotte and
Oh my gosh.
For Madison Electric, and then I moved out to Battle Creek, and I worked for their sister company, Standard Electric in Jackson.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. Wyandotte is essentially where I grew up most of my young life. My grandmother lived, I don't know how well you know Wyandotte, but lived on 6th Street off of Goddard.
Oh, yeah.
And, so I was right there. Wow, that's pretty amazing. I'm sorry, I just wanted to...
remember,
small world.
It is a small world.
The building we were in was a small building. Wasn't really suitable for an electrical wholesale outlet, but it was the old Robert Hall store.
Okay.
People around there remember the Robert. Remember the cheap Robert Hall suits. They probably all had one in a certain era.
Yeah.
But that was the building. Now they moved later on to Taylor, and by that time I was in Jackson.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I just had to cut in with that. That's quite interesting. What a small world. Okay, go ahead, Jennifer. I'm sorry.
No. That's fine. That's fine. Yeah. So, okay. So you lived in Michigan your whole entire life, and what exactly do you do today?
Well, I am a man of leisure. I've been retired for a few years, but I am working part-time at the Mothman Museum in Point Pleasant, West Virginia.
Okay. And now you just recently moved out there, is that correct?
Yes, about a month and a half, I guess.
Okay. How was that move for you?
Well, everybody's been through that. 30 years ago, I swore I would never move again, and I did. And it was, I've got a small house here with 1 million books. One of the guys that moved me were fantastic. It was the 2 Men in a Truck company.
Oh, yes.
And these guys were out of Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Okay.
Now, one of the guys told me that he thought I had more books than his hometown library. So that's very possible. And then, once that was all done, a couple of weeks later, I rented a cargo van because I still had a bunch of stuff in storage, a bunch more books. So I made an 18-hour run to Michigan from West Virginia to get the rest of my stuff.
Wow.
And I still have boxes unpacked. 1/3 of my basement is filled with empty boxes. It's still, it's so chaotic in right here. I can't even really have a guest in here yet.
Wow.
I'd be ashamed to have a guest in here yet.
I know exactly what you mean.
So do you have to have like a 5-bedroom house just to have room for all your books?
It sounds like
I have a 2-bedroom, and 1 bedroom is the main library. But then I have shelves. I brought about 6 or 8 shelves with me, and since then I bought and assembled 18 more shelves of various descriptions.
My gosh, I thought I had a ton of books.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Wow.
the shelves are up, but the books aren't all in their place yet, and it's it's.
I can
I won't have
imagine
anybody in the house for another month or two.
So is that like one of your hobbies, collecting books?
Well, I've been collecting books. As a science fiction, fantasy fan years ago, and all kinds of things. But most of them now are in the realm of the paranormal and the unexplained.
Yeah. So. I feel like we're brothers or relatives or perhaps friends from
the same kind of books.
If I showed you my book collection, it's quite unbelievable.
Yeah.
But go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're going.
Oh.
You're going now.
All right. Well, look at that. Well, thank you very much. I get to talk to Steve now. Steve, so what piqued your interest in the Mothman in particular?
Well, the first, it wasn't the first sighting, but the first major sighting occurred on November 15th, 1966. And that was in Point Pleasant.
Yep.
And this was, it occurred in there's something I've always nicknamed the TNT area, which is actually, now it's the McClintock Wildlife Area. They nicknamed TNT because back during the war, World War II, it was a place where a complex where they made explosives for the war effort. And you can Google it online, and you see these old black and white photographs of this amazing complex where they made all this stuff. They also they stored them in 100 of these bunkers, or also called igloos, which are still out there. But the area is, even back in the 60s when they first saw this thing, most of that stuff was gone. So back in another era, I was in junior high in November of 1966 when that first sighting occurred, November 15th.
Wow.
And this was two couples, the Scarberries and the Mallets, were out in this area, which had become kind of a lover's lane, and they were two married couples. They were just driving around to see if they could see any of their friends.
Yes. And
they drove by the Old North Power Plant, and they saw this thing that was later dubbed Mothman. It was about 6 or 7 feet tall, had bright red glowing eyes, about a 10-foot wingspan. And they saw it shuffling along, walking near the Old North Power Plant, and it looked like to them that it went inside the plant. But later on, after they left, they got the heck out of there. This thing, said, followed them into Point Pleasant at very high speeds down Route 62. Now, this sighting, they actually went to the police. The police separated them and got their individual stories, which all lined up. But this hit the wire services and went all over. And so I remember seeing it in the newspaper, this winged humanoid that chased these couples. And this is, again, before Mothman had his proper name. But I have to tell you, this was a few months earlier in Michigan. In March of 1966, there was a huge UFO flap that gained national attention. And Dr. J. Allen Hynek came. He was still attached to Project Blue Book. He was the astronomer from Northwestern University that was part of the Air Force's, I'm going to call it more of a debunking unit than an actual investigative unit.
Okay.
But he had come full circle where he began to believe, after being a skeptic, that there was a lot of substance to this. So the Air Force sent him out. They weren't even going to do anything at first. But then Senator Gerald Ford was pretty angry that the Air Force was ignoring a bunch of very credible people, police officers and others that were seeing these things. So he came out, and this is what this made history. I remember seeing this as a kid live on TV. Hynek is giving a press conference. Now he's got to straddle the line. The Air Force wants him to kind of ease the fears and do a little debunking, but he knows that these people are credible. He said that he thought. Now this is you'll recognize Ann Arbor, Hillsdale, and Dexter. Where a lot of these things were being seen. He said that some of the ones in Hillsdale might have been swamp gas.
Right.
And of course, they went back to their phones, called their stories in. The mystery solved. It's swamp gas, and of course that swamp gas jokes have reverberated for many decades since.
Yeah,
I believe
it had Raymond Szymanski.
Raymond Szymanski, swamp gas my ass. Yeah, is what he. That's
the book he wrote. So that was really interesting.
Hynek did regret it. Now I actually saw him speak 10 years later, at the MUFON Symposium, that's the Mutual UFO Network, in Ann Arbor, I was actually, it was close enough that I could drive there, not having a lot of money.
Right.
And the name of his talk was called Swamp Gas Plus 10 and Counting. Now, by that time, he had left the Air Force. He started the Center for UFO Studies in Evanston, Illinois. And his talk was serious, but it also had a great deal of humor when he recounted those days and some of the mistakes he made. And he showed on the screen some of the great cartoons that erupted as a result of him uttering the word swamp gas.
Right, I suppose so. So
I'll just tell you, one of them, you see the little green men, and they're there with their big blasters, and they just landed in a flying saucer, and they stopped an Earthman on the sidewalk, and the caption says, "Take us to the one to call the swamp gas."
Yeah, right.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
Now in high school, did you research more into the UFOs and the Mothman?
Well, I was fascinated by UFOs initially, and back around. I'd always heard about them. I'm sure it was that major flap in Michigan in March of '66 that really sparked my interest. We eventually we had our high school UFO club, which was now back in those days. A flying saucer was so passé. We used aerial phenomena. If you wanted to be classy.
Oh yeah,
so we were the
absolutely.
Aerial Phenomena Investigation and Research Center. Now, originally, we were the Aerial Phenomena Research and Investigation.
Okay.
Now, if you sound out that acronym, it's not very complimentary. And since this is a family show, you probably shouldn't say it out loud. So, you weren't dealing with chimps here, so we switched the I and the R around to save face.
Yeah. Oh, for funny.
But it was just basically a high school UFO club, and back in those days, there were these great books. Frank Edwards. I don't know if you're familiar with his anthologies.
Oh yes.
But Stranger Than Science and all that. That's the first place I read about things like the Kelly Hopkinsville goblins, the Flatwoods Monster, and even Bigfoot for that matter. But,
yes.
And also the Jim and Coral Lorenzen, that were the head of the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, APRO, which is a very serious organization, had many scientists involved.
Yeah, that's correct.
They wrote these great books about flying saucer occupants. So I was firmly convinced in those days that we were dealing with ET, and they were landing here, taking soil samples. That's really before we heard too much about abductions. The Barney and Benny Hill thing at the time was kind of unique, although it turns out it really wasn't. And so that was where my interest was and where my head was at.
Okay. We kind of just touched on it a little bit there, but so what was your exact opinion about extraterrestrial life when you were in high school? So essentially you did believe, is that what I'm gathering?
Yes, I thought that people were being credible and that they were seeing these things. Now, what I couldn't explain was that when you actually started to examine it, you very, very seldom got a craft, if that's what they were, that looked identical. You could get general descriptions of cigar-shaped ships and egg-shaped objects and classic flying saucers, and even the entities. We had back in those days. We had quite a variety of UFOnauts, if you want to call them that. Okay. This was before the Greys showed up and kind of took over the block. There might be some reasons for that, but even then, there were some things about it that didn't make sense. That the thing later on that really changed my thinking were the works of John Keel. Now, John Keel, of course, is probably best known for the Mothman prophecies, but he wrote a book early on called Strange Creatures from Time and Space, which is now, it's been republished, it's in trade paper size, and it's called The Complete Guide to Mysterious Beings. He covers everything, all kinds of phenomena, UFOnauts. He talked about the Mothman there. But in that book is where he first introduces the concept of window areas.
Okay.
And we can get into that if you want, but later on, about the same time, actually, they were published, but a few years later, I read something called Operation Trojan Horse.
Okay.
And I sort of came kicking and screaming to that one because he turned my world upside down. I was so happy with the ET idea.
Yeah.
But in Trojan Horse, he begins to connect a psychic phenomena, cryptids, strange lights in the sky, all together.
Yes.
And he, by the way, Keel considered himself a Fortean, i.e. Charles Fort. He really didn't like to be called a ufologist. But so those were the books that started me on a different path. And then I was in recovery from Trojan Horse, and I read Jacques Vallée's Passport to Magonia, which connected traditions and folklore with some modern-day UFO experiences.
Yes.
So my thinking was just really, it changed quite a bit.
Right. And now you had considered those two gentlemen, authors, as mentors, is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. And they both have written many other books. And, both men, I would say, that they're thinking, especially John Keel, his thinking wasn't static. Right. He would entertain other ideas, and he was flexible in his thinking, and he would change his ideas sometimes. Jacques Vallée, before he wrote Passport to Magonia, wrote two books, Anatomy of a Phenomenon and Challenge to Science. And those were looking at this as a very nuts and bolts prospect, probably ET. But then by the time he realized things weren't fitting, there's something wrong here. So when he wrote Passport to Magonia, he states in the beginning, he says, look, this is not a scientific book. But, he could see that there are things that needed to be addressed.
Right.
And when Keel started talking about window areas, the reason was he saw this situation where you very seldom got occupants that were described the same way, the same with their craft. You can see it like a 2-page spread of all the different types of craft people are seeing. Now,
right. Possibly
this is a grand central station with all kinds of beings, but maybe there's another explanation.
Right.
Also, he felt that the window areas, sometimes you would see like a Bigfoot or some kind of cryptid show up, even near a populated area, scare the hell out of people, leave footprints and hair samples, but then they're gone. Where the heck are they going? What are these? Sometimes the UFOs would seem to disappear.
Right.
So he was trying to come to grips with why these things sort of pop in and pop out. But also, he suggested that in some of these, what he called window areas, were there other things, if you traced back in history, other things occurred there earlier. Just a quick example, we can talk about more later if you want. In Dubbed, Wales, about in the middle 70s, there was a family called the Coombs family, and they eventually were going to be running a farm there in Dubbed. But prior to that, they were living in a trailer near the coastline. They started seeing religious apparitions through their window, and they would see a vision at 10 p.m. They'd see an apparition of the Virgin Mary, all dressed in white, carrying a rosary, and then it would slowly morph into an image of Jesus. Several hundred people saw this. Now, later on, when they got their farm, this was right in the midst of an amazing UFO flap. It's one of these areas, a little bit like Point Pleasant, one of these high strangeness areas where all kinds of things are going on. They were seeing 7-foot-tall, silver-suited giants, strange lights, egg-shaped craft. Sometimes they'd see these little guys that looked almost like leprechauns, but they were associated with the same egg-shaped craft. So the point is that, and they were also experiencing poltergeist phenomena in their trailer when it was there. So perhaps there's no connection whatsoever. Perhaps these religious apparitions were actually religious apparitions and not some kind of projection. But it's just interesting that if you look in some of these areas, and especially when you consider folklore, there are so many parallels with traditions in folklore and modern-day UFO experiences, such as missing time.
Right, absolutely correct. Just a smite off what we're talking about, but after high school, did you go right to college, or did you do something else before that?
I went to college for a while.
Okay.
I I got an associate's degree. That with a couple of proof of purchase seals. I was in very good.
Right.
And it was a little bit later on that I actually decided to enlist in the Navy.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay.
But actually, I did some traveling in Europe prior to that. I went backpacking for a few months.
Oh, wow.
And that's when I got a chance to see Stonehenge, back when you could still walk up and touch the stones. And I got to Loch Ness, but I was all over parts of Western Europe and the British Isles. Had a lot of relatives there, and a lot of second cousins that rolled out the red carpet for me in Scotland and England.
Wow, very interesting.
Huh.
Go ahead, John.
So have you experienced any strange phenomena yourself?
I've just one. You see, I'm the guy that nothing ever happens to. Well, one time I had a really bizarre experience, and it had to do with the TNT area. I went out there alone one night just to see if I had I was brave enough to do it. Now, it's not really that big a deal. I mean, the locals go out there all the time. But, with all the mystique of the history and the creepiness of it, I went out there to drove out to Potter's Creek Road, drove down to the 7th Igloo Road, and then parked my car and then walked in. There's some of these old bunkers are still accessible.
Yeah.
And I looked like a paranormal investigator. I had my flashlight. I had my digital recorder duct taped to my flashlight. I think, no, I didn't have my night vision goggles then. And so I just went through, and I went into one of the igloos, and then I drove back. Now, when I was driving back on Route 62, I experienced a couple flashes of light, like a strobe light, and I thought that's weird. And this whole everything that was to follow, I should have paid attention. I should have written things down. I should have tried to figure out where I was on the road when I experienced these flashes to see if I could come back and figure out what happened. I didn't do any of that. Now, I've also heard other people are in this situation, too, when these things happen, so I don't feel so bad. But I drove back to my motel, which was on the other side of the river in Ohio, in Gallipolis, Ohio.
Okay.
And I walked I opened the door, the TV set turned on by itself, and started flipping through channels steadily. And I thought, no, this doesn't happen to me. It happens to other people. I even glanced at the clock to see if I had any missing time. Now, back then, I didn't think I did, but now thinking back, I wonder, I should have written everything down. I didn't do that.
I know. I feel the same way about things. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. And I as being an intrepid paranormal investigator, I walked up to the TV set, unplugged it, and went to bed.
Right.
So, but now here's a postscript to that.
Okay.
The next year, same month, the next room over, I'm crammed in there with a couple guys. We're saving money. In fact, there are two guys that fly the Mothman at the Mothman Festival.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, the TV set turned on by itself. Now, in both cases, these were the old-style TV. And then that was it. The next day, Tim and I came in the room for some reason, and the TV set turned on by itself, flipped through a couple stations, and stopped. And so, okay, that was it. And by then, we were trying to use the remote through walls to see if this was picking up a stray signal. But it was only when I was there when this was going on. And now, here's the conclusion.
Okay.
A few years later, it's the Mothman Festival. Two couples that we know are in the next room over, which is kind of a corner. It's a bigger room where two couples could stay.
Right.
So they have one of these more like they're a smart TV.
Okay.
With the bigger screens, and they're having trouble with their volume. They have to keep turning it up to hear it. Then all of a sudden it starts blasting, and they have to go through the whole sequence again. Then all of a sudden there's a can of pop on the nightstand, and it flies off the nightstand. So.
Okay.
I tell people my best theory is that that the TNT area was a Native American burial ground, and there's people still say they see shadow people out there. They get all kinds of weird vibes. They get EVPs. If I brought something back with me, fortunately, it did not come home with me. It's still there, flipping channels.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
But that's it. There's one other. Okay, there's just one other possibility.
Okay, what was that?
A group of us were in Point Pleasant.
Okay.
We were at where the Silver Bridge used to span across to Ohio.
Okay.
And we were there with trying to get EVPs and being seeing if we could pick up anything from the people that perished. Being very respectful, by the way.
Of course.
And one of us, Emily, we didn't know it, but she had put one of these flashlights on the shoreline there. You know how on TV, right? They set the flashlight up just so it's just barely off, so that the spirits can come by and turn it on, right?
Right.
So
right.
She had done that, and then all of a sudden it starts to come on, and then we realized this flashlight's there. We thought, oh, that's interesting. So we went up to it, and we would stamp our feet to see if we could set it off with vibration or whatever. Mm-hmm. So I thought, okay, I've seen enough of these shows, right?
Yeah,
I know what to do. So I said out loud, if there's anybody here, would you please turn the flashlight on the count of 3? And 1, 2, 3, and then bang, flashlight comes on for 3 beats and turns off.
Wow.
And then I said, holy expletive.
Right.
Now, John, who listened to the recording afterwards, he's not sure, and it certainly was not a Class A EVP, but he thinks he heard a voice say, after I said that, little baby. So if that's the case,
little baby.
One of the spirits out there was belittling my.
Gotcha. Right.
Yeah, and then a little bit later, I thought, well, let's see if I can do it again. So if there anybody here, turn the flashlight on the count of 3, and then for 3 beats, nothing, and then the flashlight came on for 3 beats and then went off. Now all this could simply be a coincidence, but that's as close as I've ever gotten to a brush with the paranormal. I'm the guy that reads the books, talks to people, does the theorizing, and
but
I'm
never
I'm not the one that's going to. I'll never publish a book of experiences.
Oh, jeez. Well, I hope it happens for you. But anyway,
well, you know what?
Yeah.
If it does, my goal is to be in the present moment.
Yeah.
It's so difficult for people to, all of a sudden, even if they're there looking for something, it's there, your jaw drops. Or John Keel was in an area south of Point Pleasant, mentioned in the Mothman Prophecies,
right.
In an area where these lights were going over all the time. That the activity in Point Pleasant in the middle 60s was crazy. And he's there in one of the hollers, and he's got a camera right next to him on his seat. And this UFO, this bright UFO, comes up near the car with a lot of detail. And he said he was full of fear. Now, usually, this is the guy that would crawl around cemeteries. He went into the TNT area after people had seen the Mothman.
Oh, wow.
And, nothing fazed him. But for some reason, he was freaking out. And he didn't even think to pick up the camera. And this is something that happens a lot. So my goal would be to hopefully somehow be in the present moment. Maybe I couldn't use a phone or a camera, but I could be aware of the experience and really, see the detail and be able to talk about it afterwards. That's what I would hope to do.
Right. Well, see, that's what I do when they contact me through my dreams. See, I was told that sometimes they'll contact you through your dreams because they don't want to scare you, and it's more easier to come to you in a dream manifestation than actually real life because it's just
multiple ways, I'm sure.
Person.
Multiple ways, I'm sure.
Yeah, I just don't seem I don't seem to get information from dreams either. My dreams are just if I told people about my dreams, they just lock me up.
Yeah, that's kind of how I am. They would essentially lock me up. They'd say, "Wow, that's great. Okay, just follow me this way." And, her dreams, though, on the other hand, I could sit here all day and have my jaw on the ground. Did you make this up, or was this some sort of Hollywood script or something? But she does indeed have some strange dreams. But Steve, for those who may not know out there, our listeners and fans, with the Mothman, has there only been encounters of the Mothman in Point Pleasant, or has there been multiple other places?
Well, during that time period, he was seen all over the Ohio Valley.
Okay.
Other parts of Ohio, Pennsylvania, and so it wasn't that localized. Now, a lot of times there have been a lot of, and John Keel devotes a chapter to, I forget what he calls them, the flutter of wings or something like that. And Clark and Coleman years ago wrote an article in Fate magazine called Winged Weirdos. The thing is that people have seen weird creatures or apparitions for years. Now, they very seldom are similar to the Mothman. If some of the Keelian ideas are correct, perhaps the facade or the way these things project may not be that important. Perhaps we can get into this more later.
Yeah,
perhaps some of these things have a common origin, but they manifest differently. They may not all be separate physical things. But John Keel talked to a little over 100 people during 66 and 67. Generally, the physical descriptions were very similar. The behavior was odd. It seemed to leave footprints. He found some strange footprints, kind of skinny footprints near the Old North Power Plant.
Okay.
But this thing didn't always flap its wings. People would see it and be on the ground. It would put its wings behind it and take off straight like a helicopter.
Yeah.
Now, a bird of any size or description doesn't do that. They flap their wings, they kind of get a running start and get some airspeed to get up. The eyes did seem, although they weren't all, people didn't always see the red eyes. Right. The times that people reported them, they said they were very hypnotic, and it didn't sound like eye shine. It sounded like it was self-generated. So, and also a biologist might say that a 6 or 7 foot tall creature would need something larger than a 10-foot wingspan to get aloft.
Right.
But here's 2 other things that throw more wrenches in it. Keel had reports from a couple people that saw it very close by, and they said that it sounded like it was giving off some kind of a noise, like a humming, like perhaps something mechanical. Now, what's that? An ancient drone from the 60s? I don't know.
Right.
But here's the weird part. John Keel, and then there was another man named Franzen, a Swedish researcher that followed Keel in about a couple of years later. Okay. They were colleagues because when Keel wrote Operation Trojan Horse, right, Franzen gave him all kinds of information on the Swedish ghost rocket, the ghost flyer wave of the 30s. So Keel wrote him a letter of introduction, and when Franzen came to Point Pleasant, he was welcomed, and he talked to all kinds of people, including many of the original and many other Mothman witnesses. What he found was, and Keel found this too, that many of them would go home after their experience and have an outbreak of poltergeist phenomena.
Really?
Now, how do we reconcile, Mothman seemed like it possibly could be a physical, unknown creature at times. At other times, it seemed more like an apparition, but that doesn't quite fit either. But then, it's a paradox. We just don't know what it was.
It really is, yeah.
Right. So do you think these different cryptids that people are seeing are coming from a portal or perhaps connected to the UFOs or UAPs being seen?
It seems that there is, when we look at these events, there's a lot of high strangeness associated with them. Now, for example, Stan Gordon, a great researcher in Pennsylvania, he covered a bizarre wave in 73 and 74. I just had an email from him recently. There's still stuff going on there in Pennsylvania, crazy stuff.
Yeah.
But in Silent Invasion, he covers this bizarre series of events of very strange Bigfoot reports with green glowing eyes, didn't seem to be affected by bullets. Some of them had 3-toed footprints, seen in conjunction with strange lights, perhaps UFOs, and it was just, none of this really made any sense. And then we have the variety of Bigfoots that sometimes we talk about in the Northwest, even Ohio and other states, that looks more like a flesh and blood creature. Yeah. The possibility, Keel brought up an idea of paranormal mimicry, that perhaps some of these things are real creatures. He even talks about that in Strange Creatures from Time and Space. but then there's something in the human psyche or human consciousness, monsters from the id, if you will,
yes,
that reflect as a reflective nature, that some of these things are really sort of like counterfeits. But here's another problem. Even some of the so-called solid-looking, normal-looking Bigfoot creatures are associated with high strangeness sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people can see through them. Sometimes they seem to vanish. People talk about infrasound, which may be illegitimate, but there's even a case. I do when I do my talks, I talk about things that are responsible for stopping vehicles.
Right.
And, have some kind of interaction with the combustion engine.
Okay.
And we know dozens and dozens of cases of close proximity of UFOs where the car stalls. And, of course, that was dramatized in Close Encounters of the Third Kind with Richard Dreyfuss in his truck, right?
That's correct, yeah. EMP
they
sort
kind
of
of
deal.
went overboard with the mailboxes going all over the place.
Yeah.
That's Hollywood, right?
That is definitely Hollywood for you.
But then, if you there was a case in 1960, North Cumberland, England. Dorothy Strong is in a taxi cab, and they're driving along, and all of a sudden, this phantom army starts to manifest.
Phantom army?
They can, yes, like you've heard of phantom platoons and Gettysburg, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, phantom armies aren't completely unknown in England, and this one they could see the soldiers. They could see through them. They would, as they got close to the taxi cab, they would start to disappear. The taxi cab stalled. The fare meter went crazy, and they felt like they were being hit by some kind of a force field. Now, this turns out it was the Battle of Otterburn from 1388. The reason we know that is it's not the first time this thing has manifested, and they could tell by the uniforms what its place was in history. Yeah. So the army dissipates. Everything goes back to normal. The taxi cab is running again. No more force field. There's no record as to whether or not Dorothy was overcharged or undercharged because of the effect on the fare meter. But let's hope she got a break.
Yeah.
But now to go back to kind of circle around to your other point.
Yeah.
This is classic. This is I think it's 66, West Virginia, near Marlington. And it's a 2-lane highway along the state park there. Okay. And WD Doc Priestley is cruising along in his car. His buddies are ahead of him in a sort of a hunting bus. And all of a sudden, his car stalls and rolls to a stop. He's been running just fine. He looks over to his left, and he sees a classic Bigfoot standing there. Oh. And the Bigfoot, it's almost like the hair is starting to stand up on end a little bit, like static electricity or something. Now Priestley says he doesn't know how long he stared at this thing, but his buddies realize he's not behind him anymore. They've turned around. They're coming back. The Bigfoot decides to recede back into the woods. Okay. Priestley doesn't say anything about the Bigfoot to his buddies. Mm-hmm. So then he starts up again, gets, I don't know how far down the road he gets. The car starts chugging, smoking. The engine actually burns out.
Oh my God.
And he rolls to a stop, and he looks over to his left, and there is either the same Bigfoot or his kissing cousin standing there.
Yeah.
So, and the funny thing is, somebody I know is Zelia Edgar, who's written a great book on this stuff. She did some research and found out that Priestley actually didn't tell anybody about this for months because he wanted to come back to that area and go hunting with his buddies. And he figured if he told them he saw a Bigfoot, they might not come back with him.
Oh, God.
that almost makes the story true.
It has to be. Yeah, it has to be now. So, real quickly, oh, go ahead. Were you finished there or no?
Well, I have, after you're done, I have one more, my favorite vehicle stoppage.
Oh, you know what? Go ahead. I want to hear it. I absolutely want to hear it.
Okay. Now, we don't know if this is true or not. This took place in either the late 1800s or early 1900s, and it was reported by Elliot O'Donnell. Elliot O'Donnell was basically a paranormal investigator. He wrote all kinds of books on ghosts and disappearing people and everything. Well, in a book called Ghostland, he talks about his an uncle by marriage he just refers to as Mr. B.
Okay.
And so we don't know the exact date, but Mr. B is cruising along a haunted highway going toward Limerick in one of these old-style kind of buggy things. And it's his servant that is driving the buggy while he's kind of in the back. It's night. There's almost a full moon overhead. Everything is copacetic.
Yeah.
Now, the name of his servant is Dunkley. So this almost means it must be true. Who's going to make up a story and say the name is Dunkley? I mean, come on.
Right.
So,
right.
So he's cruising along, and all of a sudden, the horse, it's one single horse, the horse stops dead. And he turns around and looks. The horse is shivering. Dunkley has a look of terror on his face, and he's in kind of a stupor where he can't seem to function.
Yeah.
Mr. B looks down, and he sees these little shadowy forms swarming around the horse and the cart. He doesn't know what's going on, but, it's a haunted road, right? Anyway, he turns around, he grabs the reins, and he breaks the spell, and they take off. They get some distance away. Dunkley comes out of it, and he asks him, what happened? What did you see? Well, to him, in his mind's eye, he saw a troop of dancing fairies. Now, apparently, the fairies don't like it when they're making merry and you come on upon them. So Dunkley is seeing these fairies looking furious, angry, and they're climbing on the cart, and he sees them trying to pull him off. So this poor guy is in absolute terror. Now, what's interesting here is we can think of other situations where people are experiencing a paranormal incident that see it differently. Sometimes people in abduction experiences aren't even conscious, right? And here's one aspect. That's briefly, I want to talk about Betty and Barney Hill.
Yes.
They had a shared experience, and it was very similar, but it wasn't completely similar. Also, Barney wasn't always conscious. A lot of times he had his eyes closed. Betty was awake and giving the aliens hell. There was quite a difference there.
Right.
Also, they saw, while it was very similar, some of the things they saw were very different. Now, I forget which one it was, but one of them saw the aliens with slits for a nose. The other one saw them more like with a Jimmy Durante nose. Now, you young kids out there may not know who Jimmy Durante was, but Google him.
I certainly do.
Jimmy Durante nose is a far cry from two slits, right?
Yeah.
So it's just interesting because if again, we don't know if the story is true or not. It's just interesting that if it's a fabricated story, that it was told in a way where these two people experienced something differently.
Yeah.
But anyway, they're all vehicle stoppages, and there's other ones too. Stan Gordon talks about some during that 73 to 74 period where cars would stall in close proximity to a Bigfoot, possibly a coincidence. I mean, who really knows?
Right.
But it's just very interesting when we start looking at these patterns that show up.
Exactly.
Some of these patterns they take place in different time periods, different countries, and between different types of phenomena that we tend to think of as being separate.
Right.
Just real quick, how long exactly have you been researching and studying the phenomena of the Mothman?
Oh, I guess you could say half a century.
Wow. Okay.
I haven't always been deep into it. I remember when I was in the Navy, I still followed in it when I could. In fact, when I was in England, now I had been in England for a couple of months almost before.
Okay.
Or a month and a half anyway, and back in about 73. And then when I was in the Navy, I remember hitting a bookstore in either Salisbury or Bath, and I found a couple of great books by Carol and Colin Board. I don't know if you're familiar with them. They've written great books on folklore and earth mysteries and that kind of thing. Gotcha. So I was always, and I would always subscribe to things like the newspaper clipping service, the UFO newspaper clipping service, various periodicals. It never lost interest. While you can't say I've always been in intense research by any means, it's always been a fascination, and I've always followed John Keel and Jacques Vallée and some others. So it's never left me.
Wow, that's absolutely incredible. So, have you had any chance to interview anyone who has been associated with an encounter? And if so, what were their thoughts on it?
Well, I talked to a few of the original Mothman witnesses. Including Linda Scarberry, who was one of the original witnesses.
Oh, yes.
I also talked to Faye DeWitt, who is not mentioned in the Mothman Prophecies. Jeff Walmsley, who runs the... He created the Mothman Museum, and he co-founded the Mothman Festival. Now, Jeff, he's put together this incredible museum with all the history and the folklore. He even has a wall filled with with memorabilia from the Mothman Prophecies film, which I can't believe is almost 20 years old now.
I know.
But he was 5 and 6 years old when this happened. About 5 years old when the sighting started, and about 6 when the bridge collapsed. I believe his father was in the National Guard in that area where when this stuff was going on.
Okay.
And there were some National Guardsmen that did see a strange winged creature up in the tree. So anyway, he was Linda Scarberry's paper boy. They lived on the same street. So, it not only is it's cool having a monster in your backyard when you're growing up,
right.
He actually knew some of the witnesses.
Wow.
And that's amazing.
What exactly did Linda say to you when you interviewed her?
Well, I talked to her a bit. There's also some long-form interviews in a couple books by Jeff Walmsley.
Okay.
But she actually went out there with Jeff to where the old North Power Plant used to stand. I actually went down there to see it. In 1976, the Mothman Prophecies came out. I was the guy that was right there in the bookstore buying the hardcover with the dust jacket off the rack, And so the next year, I went down to Point Pleasant because I wanted to see the area. And the old North Power Plant was still standing, just kind of a ruin.
Yeah.
But so she took Jeff out there one time in the area because it's been long gone. It was demolished in the 90s. And she said, basically, she said they were driving by the road, she, her husband, and the other couple, and they saw what they thought was a man standing in the middle of the road. And then all of a sudden, that man, its wings spread out. And then they saw the red eyes, and it kind of shuffled along a bit and went into the old North Power Plant, and then that's when it chased them in. Now, Linda goes on to say that she had seen it again. She actually saw it sitting on the roof of a house across from where she lived, I think on 30th Street.
Wow.
And it was just sitting there. She was, some of the other people, Marcella Bennett was somebody that saw it and was never the same afterwards. She didn't want to drive at night and so forth. Linda thought it was something that was kind of lost. She seemed to sense that it was lonely and kind of in the wrong place or whatever.
Yeah.
So, she just had a completely different impression. Marcella Bennett, I never talked to her, but she's the one that she went out, she and her brother, and several people actually saw this when they went out there thinking it wasn't real, and they were going to scare some of their friends.
Yeah.
So Marcella Bennett, they went out to actually that Potter's Creek Road, the first road on the that you come to that goes north. There's a lot of people. There were some houses out there in that area.
Okay.
So they were going to go see some of their friends, and they were going to tap on the window and freak them out, right?
Yeah.
Well, they weren't home, or they didn't answer, and then I guess that maybe the kids were home, but the parents weren't there. So they were walking back to the car. Her brother is trying to get her attention because he's seeing some kind of strange light in the sky.
Okay.
And then this thing, the Mothman, rises up off the ground. She almost passes out. She actually dropped her child.
Oh, my gosh.
Yes. Now, the child was okay, but she picked her up, and they ran back to the house. And apparently this thing came up on the porch and walked back and forth on the porch.
Oh, wow.
Of course, the cops didn't get there.
Unbelievable.
So I've heard a long-form interview with her. It really affected her badly, whereas Linda kind of felt, I mean, it scared her, but she kind of felt sorry for it.
Right.
Now, Faye DeWitt is someone you may have seen in documentaries and so forth. She's the one that will often say it with her, I think, North Carolina accent. I'm not sure, but she'll say something like, "It had the biggest, reddest eyes you ever did see." Mm-hmm. So she was just a kid. Her brother was there, and her siblings. They drove out to the old North Power Plant, and he because they were just gonna try and scare he was gonna try and scare his siblings, and they saw this thing, and she said that she didn't actually see it fly. It looked like it leaped up on top of the old North Power Plant. Now this is one lady I did talk to one-on-one, and she said it jumped up on the hood and looked at him with these eyes. So the descriptions were fairly consistent, but the things about its locomotion and how it became aloft and so forth, would just suggested that it was something beyond being just physical.
Right.
Now, just let's throw, there's always a wrench in it. I talked to another guy, Tom Urey, okay? Tom Urey saw basically a Thunderbird. This thing had a 10 to 12 foot wingspan.
Wow.
And he said, look, it wasn't an osprey. He said, I'll take a lie detector on this. And he said, now, I was talking to him at the Mothman Festival. Okay. He's sitting next to Linda Scarberry and Faye DeWitt. Now, actually, this is the first time he met those two ladies. You think everybody in the small town knows everybody, right?
Right.
Especially if you're a Mothman witness. But
exactly.
He just met them. Now, a few years before that, he had gone with Marcella Bennett, the one that dropped her child. They went on a trip to Katanning, Pennsylvania, because that's where they filmed the Mothman Prophecies as a substitute for Point Pleasant. Mm-hmm. So on that trip, Tom said to her, okay, let's tell each other our story. And so because Tom thought at first people saw the same thing he did, but due to the freak-out factor, perhaps they added in details that weren't there. But when he heard Marcella's story, he decided that no, they had actually seen something different. And if anybody looks into these areas where these bizarre things happen, that's kind of apropos, where things aren't always consistent. There are these aberrations in the middle of a bunch of anomalies. You know? So, and here's another kind of a funny story. Mm-hmm. Now, Mary Heyer was the reporter that became a friend and colleague of John Keel. Okay. She wrote a column called "Where the Waters Mingle," which refers to the Ohio and the canal that come together right there at Point Pleasant. And she was the one that was writing articles about Mothman sightings, about Men in Black, and about UFOs and so forth. Yeah. And now she reported Tom's story, but she got something. I think she implied that it came from the direction of the TNT area, something to connect it more to the Mothman when it wasn't the case. I forget exactly what it was, but Tom was a little upset. Now, he knew Mary. They were friends. So when he went into her office, he jokingly said, "Mary, I ought to kill you." And she said, now Tom is telling me this story 40 years later. Yeah. She said to Tom, "Don't worry, Tom. This will all blow over in about 2 weeks." Well, it's never blown over.
Obviously, yeah. Steve, we're up against the break here. You mind hanging out and continuing this conversation?
Not a problem.
All right, excellent. We'll be right back with you then. So, folks, we are talking, of course, with Stephen Ward, and this is episode 2, Mothman Confidential. We have much more to talk about. Coming up next is NTR New Music Now. So enjoy, folks. Hey everybody, this is Daniel Brewer from Night Talks Radio. Coming up next, we have brand new music now. featuring the Darren Holland Project. Here's Darren and Cheryl to tell you a little bit more.
Hey, this is Darren.
This is Cheryl, but you know us as the Darren Holland Project from Kansas City.
In the Show Me State of Missouri, with our new alternative rock political pop song, Lead the Way.
Right here on NTR New Music Now. And don't forget, more Night Talks Radio with special guest Stephen Ward is heading your way for Hour 2 of Mothman Confidential. Enjoy.
And there you have it, folks, the Darren Holland Project on NTR New Music Now. If you want to hear more from the Darren Holland Project, go to Facebook. Check them out at the Darren Holland Project or Twitter at the Darren Holla1. We'll see you next week on NTR New Music Now with another brand new band to jam out to right here on Night Talks Radio.
Want to reach Night Talks Radio? That's easy. Simply dial 1-507-384-9390. Or, for first-time callers, just dial 1-507-307-4424. From somewhere in the great upper Midwest, here's Daniel Brewer and Jennifer Gregerson.
Hey everybody, welcome back. This is hour 2. We are, of course, talking to Steve Ward, and this is Mothman Confidential. We're going to pick up right where we left off, folks. Steve, are you still there?
I am here.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, real quick, I wanted to get this out of the way. Do you have any books that you're currently working on or published?
Yes, I'm working on one with following these same kind of ideas, patterns, connections, parallels. I tell people it'll be out sometime this decade.
Sometime.
Keep your eyes open. I have contributed to a couple of books, a chapter here and there to books about the Mothman. One of them was published by Timothy Green Beckley and edited by Beckley.
Okay.
It was called Weird Winged Wonders. I think it's still available on Amazon.
Okay.
And it was very cool because I was in with some very good company like Brad Steiger and Scott Corrales and others.
Oh, yeah,
This is
Steiger.
basically a chapter on the Mothman and the Mothman Festival. And then there's another book by Chatan Noir about, I forget the exact title, but it's about winged humanoids in the Midwest, I think. And I devote another chapter there to Mothman. So.
Okay.
Okay.
But just keep your eyes open this decade for that book.
I will. I'll make sure people know by 2030 or so. Or...
Yes, I think we'll be good by 2030.
So, Steve, being the MK Ultra and indoctrination has been introduced in the past, and we can clearly see what is happening to the world today. Is it possible that the government could be behind all of this with the cryptids and the UFOs and stuff like that?
In a sense, to take our focus off things, I would say.
Yeah.
Well, I think I don't think they could be responsible for all of it. I do think Nick Redfern a lot of his books.
Yes.
He's done a lot of the Freedom for Information Act, and he. There have been suggestions. I think that even some of the Men in Black stuff may have been the government messing around. I think that I think some of the stuff and some of the sightings were probably tweaked by the government. The son of the guy that originally owned the National Enquirer revealed that I think the CIA came to his father.
Steve, I'm sorry. Real quick, we have a phone call coming in for you. I'm assuming it's a question for you.
Oh, sure.
Hello, caller, are you there?
Suggestions. I think that even some of the Men in Black stuff may have been the government messing around. I think that I think some of the stuff and some of the sightings were probably tweaked by the government.
Oh, you know what? You know what, caller? If you could, if you could turn down your radio. That's what it was. It took me a second to realize what was happening there.
Delay. Okay.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hey,
yep, I did
there
that.
you
Thank
are.
you.
Okay, now everything's perfect. You got a question for Steve?
I do, actually. This is Cheryl from the Darren Holland Project, actually.
Oh, well, hey, you were just on, as a matter of fact.
Wonderful song.
Yeah, I just heard it. Thank you. So
No
I
problem.
was listening, and I just had a question really quick. I mean, I'm a huge fan. John Keel, Hans Holzer, Ed and Lorraine Warren, and all those, like Lauren Coleman and Brad Steiger, like you mentioned earlier. What is your view of exactly what the Mothman is? Do you feel that it's an alien, or do you feel that it's a cryptid, or do you feel it's both? Or an
I'm afraid I'm gonna have to cop out. When I say it's a paradox, when I do speaking, I have several basic premises, and one is that we have to listen to the experiencer. Of course, we're always trying to determine if that person's credible, and if they've had an experience that was really something more mundane that they misinterpreted. But when back in the 1960s, I was an ET guy. I had no use for ghostly phenomena. I wasn't that interested in cryptids, and that was it.
Right.
And in fact, I have to admit that when I got my copy of Fate magazine, now people don't.
That magazine.
Yes, but people don't hate me because I recovered. I reformed. I used to cut out the UFO article, take the cover and back cover, and staple them together and throw out the rest of the magazine. Yeah. I went through therapy and I've recovered and I have a nice collection now. But the point is that when I made this transition, when I started reading Keel, I had to change my thinking. And so when we listen to the people that reported the Mothman, it just doesn't all make sense. Sometimes it seems like an apparition, sometimes more physical. Even some kind of a paraphysical being seems to explain more of it, but it doesn't really explain its origin. And, Keel talked about, maybe we can talk about this later. Yeah. He used the term ultra-terrestrial, and he even talked about, and I love this word, transmogrifications of energy. So we just don't know what the source was, but we know people reported things. While they saw physically pretty much the same thing, its behavior just didn't make sense. So I'm with John Keel. He also did not know what the Mothman was.
Okay. That makes sense.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that, Cheryl. We enjoyed you on the show, by the way. That was a great song.
Well, thank you.
We hope to have you back.
Thank you so much for playing us.
Yeah,
appreciate
no
it.
problem.
And thank you for having me on here, too.
Absolutely. Yep, thanks for the call. We'll talk to you in a little bit.
All right.
All right,
have
bye-bye.
a great night.
You
Bye-bye.
too.
Thank you.
Bye. All right, Steve, now that we're back here, real quick, I'm sorry, you got cut off there when the phone call came in. You were explaining.
Yes, I can't remember what I was explaining.
Neither can I.
I'm sure it was very deep and fascinating, but I can't remember.
It indeed was, and I'm sitting here and I can't remember.
What we were kind of explaining is it possible that the government could be behind all
there you go.
Okay.
That's right.
There are some people that believe the Mothman thing was a special ops and so forth, and there does seem to be, in some of these areas, a government presence, a base or something like that. The thing is that this stuff has been going on forever. So, before the government really was even aware of it or would be around. Let me give you a good example of something that I would say the government would have had no part in whatsoever.
Okay.
At least I don't think so. Let's go back to 73, 74. Stan Gordon reporting on these bizarre Bigfoot reports seen in conjunction with strange lights in the sky. If you go back to 1897, now that's a key year where people were seeing these majestic airships. And this is before Zeppelins and dirigibles were really viable. But people would see these things all over the U.S., and some of them were journalistic hoaxes, but I don't believe they all were. Well, if you go back to 1897 in Ohio, they were seeing this thing, and it was, in a few days they'd see it again. But between mid-April and mid-May, this thing was making a circuit clockwise around Ohio, or maybe there were several of them, who knows. Right. It even lapsed over into Sistersville, West Virginia. Well, on the ground, there were some interesting things going on. Around Chillicothe, people were seeing this large black cat, and it was kind of odd-looking. It had kind of an oversized head and short legs. They never were able to shoot it or trap it. Now, it may have just been an odd-looking critter that had nothing to do with this thing in the sky.
Right.
But in Adams County, where the Serpent Mound is, they were seeing something that, in today's language, they would call it a Sasquatch, but they called it a wild man or some kind of gorilla. So here, again, who knows, but here you have strange objects in the sky that are further ahead of what we were at the time.
Yeah.
And on the ground, you've got something like a Bigfoot, just like what was happening way ahead in 73 and 74. So my point is that these patterns, these window areas, and these patterns keep showing up in different parts of the country and different time periods. I don't think the government was messing with Pennsylvania at the time, making these projections, but I'm pretty certain that they were not causing the phenomena in 1897. Although some people believe that the airships were some kind of a secret cabal or organization doing this. So, we really...
Again, you never
it's very
really know.
hard to be... That's right. It's very hard to be definitive. You can't... the only thing you can say absolutely is that there's more than one answer to some of these things.
Absolutely, real quick, this is going to be a little off subject, but I wanted to ask you, since you are so knowledgeable, what are your thoughts, because of obviously recently this has been in the news, of the Hadron Collider?
I guess I think that nothing's going to happen.
Right. At least I'm hoping.
I might wake up one morning and maybe my feet will be on backwards, And I think,
or it might be stretched out like 30 feet or something. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, let's hope not.
I hope there's no black hole created or anything like that. But to go along with the Mandela effect. Of course, when they discovered the Higgs boson particle back in 2012, I do believe it is, they spoke of how that we've been put in a parallel universe, a different, like a multiverse, and that's where we get the Mandela effect from, where people believe that for sure they remember something happening. Of course, Nelson Mandela. Or other things where, I was using the example of the Monopoly guy, how everybody, a majority of people in the United States, swore that he had a monocle on his eye, which he never did. Mm-hmm. But they can attest to the fact that for sure he did. They would put money up on this. So with us being put in a parallel universe, that was the issue that came from it, was these sort of matrix-like glitches that made people believe what they wanted to believe, and others to say, no, that's not true whatsoever. So there's my little take.
I guess I'm a little skeptical. I don't really expect anything. I think maybe they'll discover some things with the collider.
Yes.
Something about subatomic particles. Maybe I don't know that they're going to find this God particle or whatever that they're talking about. In fact, I'm sure they won't find an ultimate particle. I mean, I don't know if it even exists in this realm. But some of the Mandela effect stuff, I have to say, I'm very skeptical. I think that when you look at the Monopoly guy, he looks like a guy that should have a monocle.
He does.
And maybe that's why people
right?
think.
Yeah. There's again.
Go
ahead.
That silliness about the James Bond film Moonraker, the one blonde lady that's with Jaws.
Yeah,
that was one of the worst Bond films ever.
know.
But anyway, everybody says they remember her with braces, but she didn't have braces. Well, again, she's acting kind of like a nerdy. It's sometimes these things are just logical progressions of a particular illustration or character that could be there, and then people think they're there, and they're convinced that it was. I guess I don't believe in the Mandela effect.
Yeah, I'm skeptical myself. Don't get me wrong. I'm certainly entertained by it. I'm researching this stuff, but yeah, I don't know if I quite believe in it yet or anything like that. But
and the Nelson Mandela thing, I believe was simply there was a rumor at the time, a belief that he was dead, and when he wasn't, and that became something where people believed for sure that it was recorded in the paper that way. And so I guess I don't I can be the dumbest guy I know, but I just don't believe in the Mandela effect. So.
Right. Okay. Of course, I just wanted to get your thoughts on that. So, but Jennifer, it looks like you have a serious question there. I'm sorry, I had to ask about the Hadron Collider.
That's all
and
right. That's all right. It wasn't.
And if it's Jif or Jiffy peanut butter,
it wasn't a dumb question. It was an interesting question.
Well, thank you. I certainly try.
Now I understand that you are part of the Mothman Festival. Can you explain to the listeners what you do and what the festival even consists of, and what time you can go to it?
Well, I mentioned that I had been to Point Pleasant in 1977. My next visit was 2006 to the first Mothman Festival that I attended. Okay. It had been going on since 2002, I think. 2000. And now it's as time went on, I went from a happy-go-lucky attendee buying everything with Mothman stamped on it right. to someone that was working behind the scenes and in front of the scenes. I have spoken there. I have been the guy that introduces the speakers. I go out to the TNT area now and help the guys set up the Mothman and some other stuff.
Okay.
But the festival is beyond awesome. You have to do more than just put it on your bucket list. You have to get there, everybody. And what it is it's every third weekend in September. Okay. This year it's going to be the 17th and 18th, 2 days. Saturday and Sunday at the State Theater. There's speakers all day. They talk about all kinds of subjects. Up and down Main Street. Now there's thousands of people that show up. Up and down Main Street, you have all the usual suspects. You have T-shirts, food, bouncy houses, a zip line. Normally, in the vacant lot, we have a blow-up Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. I don't know if he's going to make it this year or not.
Right.
But the Mothman Museum is right there. The majestic statue is right there. And on the perpendicular road where the statue is, that's usually where the speakers have their table set up and their books. They're very interesting people, very accessible. Now, the best part of all, you have got to get to the festival early Saturday morning. Go right to the information booth and buy your ticket for the TNT Hayride. Because Saturday night, we take people out into the dreaded TNT area and where the Mothman was seen. And what we do is we go out to the Farm Museum. And if you look across the road from the Farm Museum is where the North Power Plant used to stand. And that's where the Mothman, right where the Mothman was seen. Okay. Now, there's 3 tractors and there's 3 carts. Jeff Wamsley, who runs the museum, has the only proper hayride. I mean, he actually has bales of hay on his. Now, Brittany Brittany Sayre, she was a former Miss Mothman because they have a Miss Mothman pageant there every year as well.
Really?
And her father was in the National Guard when all this was going down. So she has she and Jeff have all these great local connections. I'm just an interloper from the Midwest, But so I've been doing this. I just moved down there a month and a half ago, but I've been doing this for years. Right. So we all are tour guides, and we start out into the TNT area, which is now it's the McClintock Wildlife Area. There's very few remnants of what was there back in the 40s and 60s, and it's creepy as heck in the nighttime. So we start out, and it's a little bit like a Halloween hayride, but you don't really need anything because it's so atmospheric. Okay. But the first thing that happens is the dreaded Men in Black. They've got 3 guys in black suits, black fedoras, and dark sunglasses, and they're there with a bullhorn, and they're telling you it's a restricted area. You've got to turn around.
Oh, wow. That sounds awesome.
They're a lot more. Well, they're a lot more like the Keystone Cops than the real Men in Black.
Right.
Now, they used to. I don't think they can do this anymore, but they used to chase us in a golf cart. They had a flashing light on top and a siren. They must have traded in their black Cadillacs for golf carts.
Yeah, I guess
these guys were just hilarious.
Wow.
Now then, the other thing I can tell you is it always changes a bit, but at one point, you see there's a couple guys, John and Tim. Okay. They portray the Men in Black by day, but they fly the Mothman by night. If you go into the Mothman Museum, into the souvenir part, and look up at the ceiling, you'll see a Mothman up there suspended. They take him down. They take him out to the TNT area. They hide in the area called the Old Acid Plant behind all the foliage. They run this wire down, and they have this ingenious low-tech delivery system with a hand crank. His eyes are lit up with battery power, and they blast a sound effect over speakers. I can't tell you where they got the sound effect because they have never paid any royalties. Okay. They could be incarcerated or fined. So I won't. You'll hear it when you get there. But it's a really the actual Mothman actually sounded like a squeaky fan belt. That's so lame, you know.
Right.
This terrifying creature sounds like a little mouse, but the sound effect they have is beyond awesome. Anyway, it is so much fun. The interaction, I carry one of those personal little PA things where people can hear me over the tractor.
Right.
And the interaction between the people, and I'll say things like. Especially, it's really fun when the little kids are on there, you know.
Oh, I bet.
And sometimes they'll look at our special effects and they'll say something derogatory, and I'll say, "What do you mean? We spent extra $20
nowadays."
And then I'll say, "Well, how much did you pay for the ride?" And they'll say, "Well, $5." And you should have got the $10 ride. That one's awesome. You got a better tour guide, and you see the real Mothman. Anyway, it's never the same. And it's just so much fun. It's 2 days of, and even we actually start on Friday. A bunch of us meet Friday night. We go to Village Pizza, which used to be Tiny's restaurant, where a famous Mothman sighting happened over it back in the '67, I think.
Okay.
And then we take a bunch of people out to the TNT area before the big crowds get here. So it's a place you can go and talk to great speakers, great researchers. You can talk to other people about this stuff, and they won't look at you sideways like some of your family members when you tell them what you did the past weekend. Did that on purpose? Okay.
No, I mean that
it really is a blast.
That sounds great. Well, yeah, we're going to put that on the calendar for sure. I definitely want to go, but we have a 4-year-old daughter who is just mystified by this type of stuff, believe it or not, and really digs what mommy and daddy are doing. On this whole.
You got to start them young.
You do. And she's mystified, like I said, about this whole online radio stuff that we talk about all this cool stuff. Yeah. And and right in the middle.
The thing right now, honestly, is her planets.
And that's
all
right.
Of her planets, just about.
That's right in the middle. Yeah, of her looking with her binoculars outside and saying, "Oh, there's Jupiter," or "There's blah blah blah," as she's asking these questions. So I think she would absolutely love that.
Oh yes.
So
there's plenty of stuff for the kids, up and down Main Street, and listen, the area. If you just walk a block and a half from where the statue is, that's 6th Street. That's where the bridge used to go over to Ohio. Okay. They have a memorial there on the sidewalk. They have the 46 names of the people that died on the bridge. Oh. There's a beautiful mural along the flood wall that shows the way the bridge looked going over to Ohio. It's done with the perspective, it disappearing off into the distance. Okay. And also, if you go from the statue straight down to the flood wall, there's all kinds of scenes of various battles that took place back during the Revolutionary War, and if you go down a little bit to the south, you'll see other sculptures by Bob Roach, the same guy that did the Mothman. Okay. You'll see Chief Cornstalk. You'll see Daniel Boone, Mad Ann Bailey, some general whose name I can't remember because I know the weird stuff better than the actual history. If you go a little further down, you'll hit Twende Park where the two rivers come together. It's beautiful down there. Chief Cornstalk is buried there. There's more monuments. Just within walking distance, there's all kinds of history and things to see there. And the museum, I can't stress how well done Jeff Wansley and his family has done the museum. It's phenomenal.
Wow. Yeah.
And people, listen, let me tell you, one Saturday I was in there, we had a young man in from Mexico, we had 2 men in from England, and a family in from Puerto Rico. Oh, wow. And last week we had a family in from Hong Kong. People come from all over the world, and that's their destination. They're not just there visiting family and decide to go there, although that happens too.
Right.
But a lot of people from all over the U.S., this is a specific destination that they've been planning to go to for a long time. And Jeff is about to knock out another wall because he's got another warehouse full of stuff that he hasn't been able to display yet.
Wow.
Cool.
Yeah, I know where we're going in September.
Yeah.
So,
exactly.
After, seeing all the new research and studies that are out there now, about extraterrestrial life, interdimensional beings, whatever have you, how have your thoughts changed about ETs and aliens since high school now that you've heard all this new information, so to speak?
Well, I've even John Keel, he rejected the ET hypothesis by the late 60s. I think with all the stuff he was experiencing in Point Pleasant, and there was also bizarre stuff going on in New York around Long Island where he was living. I mean, he was just in the midst of all kinds of stuff. But even so, later on, he left the door open a little bit for ET. He was sure that there was more than one answer. Now, I suspect that some of this, at one time I was completely convinced that none of this had anything to do with ET, that all these things were, I don't know, psychic projection somehow of a collective unconscious.
Right.
You remember the film Forbidden Planet?
Oh, yes. I literally just watched that 3 days ago.
Well, the MacGuffin was the monsters from the id, right?
That's right.
The suggestion that these and another a priest named Dr. Donald Oman, who went to exorcise the Loch Ness monster and even tried to exorcise the Bermuda Triangle. This guy has some pretty lofty goals.
Yeah,
he called
pretty
it the
big.
Phantom Menagerie. And I think the Phantom Menagerie is a pretty good thing. There's some aspect of this that is reflective, that is ethereal, is temporal, is paraphysical.
Yes.
I don't know if it's coming out of other dimensions or if somehow we're even co-creating some of this. But some of this the suggestion is that it's very physical. I think there might be elements of both. I mean, if we listen to the experiences and the experiencers, that's kind of the suggestion. That's kind of where it leads us. So I don't know if it's ET or if these beings are truly interdimensional. The stuff on the Skinwalker Ranch, some of it suggests, if you isolate some of the stuff on the Skinwalker Ranch, you would say, oh, this is ET or extra-dimensional. Right. But if you look at the broad spectrum, there are elements of it that are more like the trickster.
Yeah.
I mean, there's this bizarre, an unruly child a mischievous child is running some of this. So it's so elusive. It's so hard to get a grasp on. So with the disclosure, I have to say I am surprised that the government has made any admission to say that, those are real. It's real footage of something. We don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But still, they don't go any further. I think
they sure don't.
Waiting for the next celebrity breakup to take people's minds off it.
Yeah.
And then part of it is they probably. I don't believe that the government knows a whole lot. They might, but the big secret might be is that hey, we really don't know much. And we don't want to admit that there's something very powerful out there that we can't control.
That would cause chaos as well. Right. If the government told you, we don't know what the hell it is, versus we know exactly what it is.
But John Keel started when he saw that these things, these creatures or whatever, didn't always make sense, and UFOs and so forth. He thought that perhaps. He talked about these strange meandering lights, and he thought maybe, and he talks about this in the Mothman Prophecies and Trojan Horse, that maybe that's the only objectively real thing about some of this. And then people are sort of programmed. They encounter this light, and then it becomes maybe a hairy biped walking into the woods, maybe a large black triangle. He used the term ultra-terrestrial, because he said he used it as a literary device because he's just trying to... He thought these things were a natural condition of the planet. Strangely enough, he got that term. He borrowed it from Ivan Sanderson. Of course, Ivan Sanderson, the great British naturalist, transplanted to New Jersey, probably best known for The Abominable Snowman, Legend Come to Life, but he wrote other great books on UFOs. So, and then Keel also thought that perhaps some of these were, again, transmogrification. The only other place I've ever seen that word is in Kelvin and Hobbes comic strips, where he gets out his transmogrifier and he changes himself. Remember that?
Yes, I do. I got Kelvin and Hobbes, one of the best of Kelvin and Hobbes in the bathroom as we speak. Yep. I love Kelvin and Hobbes.
Oh, absolutely. But he thought that perhaps these things were like temporal. I guess you could call them temporal constructions.
Yeah.
But he also thought that in some of these cases, people might actually be going into a trance state and feeling like they were having some of these experiences. That not hallucinations, but sort of illusory. There's some kind of an outside stimulus causing this. And his thinking wasn't static, but these things were, I mean, they had a certain physicality at times. They would leave footprints. In fact, you want to hear something really weird. This is not really what we're talking about, but when he went out there to check out the Old North power plant, and he saw these weird looking prints he thought might be associated with Mothman.
Yeah.
He also found these large dog-like footprints that had to be from something extremely heavy because of how far it was pressed into the ground. Now, he consulted Ivan Sanderson. Ivan Sanderson said that they keep finding these footprints in some of these paranormal hotspots. Well, a few years ago at a Michigan MUFON meeting, a retired professor from Wayne State University had been doing some investigation into Bigfoot and UFOs in Michigan, and he happened to say that this particular lecture wasn't for public consumption, and some of the stuff was really out there. But he did say at one point, he says, we keep finding these large dog-like footprints in these hotspots.
Yeah.
And I thought, where have I heard that before? And I remember, okay, it's the Mothman Prophecies. I consulted with Linda Godfrey, who wrote The Beast of Bray Road, and all those other great books on those cryptids, and she said the same thing. So here we have 4 researchers separated by half a century, all telling us that these footprints are showing up in these hot spots. And they're not, obviously they've been made by something, but the dog man reports haven't really come into consciousness until about the 90s. I mean, people were seeing them, right. But let me just talk about one other thing. I mean,
no problem.
I think Keel was 100 years ahead of his time. He had these great catchphrases, and one of them was, ask the contactee what they had for breakfast. And what he meant was, ask the experiencer what he or she had, not literally for breakfast, but he found that when people had some kind of an experience, if he questioned them about all the way back to their childhood and other aspects of their life, he would find out that oftentimes they were somebody that experienced not just UFOs, but they might also experience cryptids, paranormal phenomena, and so forth. Right. So a few years ago, a young lady from New Hampshire contacted me through Facebook, and she said she wanted to tell somebody about her experience. Well, she lived near Londonderry, near an airport. Okay. She and her husband were out on the porch having a cigarette early one morning. It's still kind of dark. They're very familiar with the lights that around the airport. But all of a sudden, they saw these strange lights coming toward them, and they couldn't figure out what it was. And then all of a sudden, they're not standing next to each other on the porch anymore. It's a little bit lighter, and they looked up, and there's a giant black triangle just brushing the tops of the trees overhead, and then it passes over. And they did what so many other people do. They didn't respond to it at the time. They turned around and went back to bed.
Yeah.
When they woke up, she thought, well, that was weird. We didn't even comment on it. Right. And then she realized she was missing about a half hour of time. So she was on a quest to find a therapist, and she had not made a breakthrough at that time. But based on Keelian ideas, I asked her a whole list of questions. And to make a long story short, I found out that they had been experiencing classic haunting phenomena in their house. Both her sons were experiencing orb phenomena. The younger one was seeing these golden orbs dancing outside his window at night.
Oh, wow.
The older son had an orb come in and surround him in the front room and then take off through a wall. She experienced shadow people. That's another thing. Rosemary Ellen Guiley, a great researcher we lost a few years ago, she was investigating shadow people and found out that a large percentage of them were also experiencing classic abduction phenomena.
Wow.
But anyway, I went on to ask this lady, I said, now this is going to sound weird, because I knew people that had these experiences might have seen a Bigfoot or something like that. Right. And I said, have you ever seen a Bigfoot or some kind of an animal you couldn't identify?
Yeah.
And she told me no, and then she said, oh, wait a minute. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law saw something strange on the property. And what they saw was something like a black panther, but it was standing on two legs. So you had, if I was frozen in the 1960s, reading books by Apro, and thinking about where the UFOnauts were coming from, I never would have known to ask any of these other questions, and all this would have remained beneath the surface. So that's one of the contributions that John Keel gave to us, finding out that these people were tuned. Some people are tuned in. I'm obviously not one of them, but these people, many people have had these experiences all their life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and then that's interesting that you say that, because that's kind of how it happened with me. Is I had the paranormal, and then after the paranormal, I had, godlike experiences, angels, and dynamic experiences, and then it went on to being contacted by the ETs. So yeah, it's all connected in one way or another, and it's really strange how that works.
It is.
Well, Stan Gordon told me. Now, Stan Gordon has interviewed all kinds of people.
Oh, yeah.
He's also talked to experiencers that have been interviewed by other people. And sometimes you'll get a situation where he was told that the person was telling him about, they saw this Bigfoot, but, I also saw this strange light in the sky. I don't want to hear about your UFO. I just want to hear about the Bigfoot. And conversely, right. They had people that saw a UFO, and then say, I saw this Bigfoot-like creature. I don't want to hear about Bigfoot. I want to hear about the space people from Alpha Centauri. So there are people, it's perfectly fine to specialize, but I think that, it's almost natural to find that people are experiencing more than one type of phenomena. Not always, of course, but that's why it's so important to listen to the experiencer. But when we do that, I maintain that we will begin to unravel and find patterns and connections and parallels, and you don't have to imagine it. It's there.
Right. Yeah, without question.
Exactly. Now, I have just another question here for you real quick, but before I get into this question, I wanted to ask you, what is your theory on all of this? Do you believe that we are manifestation of, like doing conscious manifestation, like using our conscious to basically drum everything up that we see?
There is something to do with human consciousness that either creates or co-creates this somehow. There's certain archetypes that are repeated. Now, but if we do create these things, these images like tulpas or whatever, psychic projections, there are certain categories that come up. I mean, if that's strictly true, why don't we see images of Professor Dumbledore flying on a broom sometimes? Because that's really heavy in consciousness. Right. Mm-hmm. There are certain select areas. So, but there is something, if you go all the way back, these strange meandering lights, they used to be called dragon tracks in another era. Fairy lights. Sometimes they literally thought they were witches flying on their broom, and the light was the lantern they were carrying. And then later on, you had the mysterious airships. You didn't always see the airships. Sometimes you would just see a light. And then you had the ghost flyers in Sweden. And sometimes, again, you might see these planes seem to be coming from the way up north, these giant planes with searchlights with no place to land. But sometimes you just see the light. And then there was the Foo Fighters in World War II. And then, it's some of this may be physical, but it's almost like the manifestations have changed and have always been beyond our technology. So the airships were ahead of dirigibles and Zeppelins and so forth. So there's a suggestion, maybe Keel was onto something with paranormal mimicry.
Well, I was going to say, just a little bit that, for example, anxiety. Okay,
Yeah.
let's take anxiety for example.
Okay.
You can literally cause yourself to have a heart rate of, say, 140 or something, super crazy, completely nervous and all that. You manifest all this into believing you're having a heart attack or whatever. You truly believe this. It's like on the same line with this. When you hear it and see it so much, perhaps you start manifesting these things in your head, creating that type of stuff. It just kind of popped in my head.
Well,
Possibly.
if you look at some of the Men in Black phenomena, if you go back to the beliefs where the witches were consorting with demons, these demons oftentimes share the same characteristics as the Men in Black. They even dress the same way with hats and so forth. And there were a lot of similarities. This stuff has been with us forever. I think that some people have said that if there really are no aliens, we would be projecting them anyway somehow. But that being said, that while I had been very much on that path for a long time, there are some aspects of this that definitely suggest there is some other intelligence, a real physical intelligence that interacts with this somehow. And I have wondered, what if both are true? What if there's this mechanism in human consciousness that creates or co-creates some of these things? What if there are some other intelligence here that is aware of that? What if they could manipulate that somehow through force of will or some kind of technology? Perhaps they could mask their own activities by, it gets really crazy. And then how would you know? Separate the two?
Yeah.
You wouldn't know.
It would be impossible.
Right.
But I have to say, there are elements of both that seem to be legitimate. And so that's, again, I guess maybe the title of my book will be, I Just Don't Know a Damn Thing.
That is a very good title, sir. I'll give you that right now.
So now, Steve, science is advancing quickly. Do you think we'll ever find out the real connection of humanity and the unexplained around us?
Connection with what?
The connection of humanity.
Like
what is our purpose and the unexplained around us?
You know what, I've been very cynical about that, but I think we have made some progress with people like Keel and Vallée, and there's a whole array of more recent researchers that are on that same path. So, it's almost like, how there's all these traditions that thoughts are things that we can, and that the consciousness and the connection with matter.
Yeah.
And we talk about how you keep going down to smaller and smaller particles, and on a microcosm, there's vast spaces between them. It's almost like there's this connection between consciousness and matter. There's some kind of link there, but we can't really put our fingers on it. We can't really understand it. Sometimes I wonder if the laws that govern the paranormal, and I assume there are laws, even though we don't really understand them, and they seem almost magical. I almost wonder if those laws exist somewhere in that intermediate zone, that twilight zone between what we call physicality, matter, and consciousness.
Right.
So if that's the case, this is really elusive. It's so hard to get a grasp on that. So I guess it's what it's like. It's like the Red Queen effect. Remember Alice in Wonderland?
Oh yeah.
Yes, and the Red Queen tells her, to get anywhere you got to run faster and faster. So Alice is running as fast as she can, and the trees are in the same place.
Yep.
So that's the way I feel sometimes about trying to figure out what's behind this.
Wow,
so
that is
I don't
spot
know if
on.
the trees are ever going to start moving or not. But you know what? There's something absolutely inherent in humanity where, and if you've seen the film The Mothman Prophecies, Richard Gere is talking to Alan Bates, who plays Dr. Leek,
yes.
heel spelled backwards,
yep.
and he says, he's at his wit's end because he's trying to understand what's happening in Point Pleasant, and he says, didn't you need to know? That's the way we feel.
Yeah, need.
Now, Dr. Leek says, and Alan Bates plays it so well, he pauses, he cocks his head a little, and he says, we're not allowed to know.
Right.
And I thought,
right.
Well, maybe not, but it doesn't stop us somehow. We still have this drive to learn and understand.
Absolutely must know.
For whatever reason, it's part of the human condition. So even though we may not have the answers or be able to get them, we're still going to strive for them.
Right.
Oh,
so
without question.
Maybe we're not supposed to have the answers. Maybe it's all put out there for us because maybe it's so we won't get bored and we can keep researching.
Who knows? It could be for it could be for anything.
Yep. Exactly.
But
if existence,
go ahead.
Existence is a paradox. Perhaps we will not, because of that, we will not be able to determine an ultimate truth.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I fully agree.
We shouldn't despair because I think we have made progress. We're from the days of Kenneth Arnold's sightings of the saucers skipping over water. We have made progress.
Yes,
right. But
indeed.
There is a time of going too far too. I think this Hadron. I can't pronounce him.
Hadron Collider. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think that is going too far.
That is going too far, you think?
Yes, I think it's going too far. It doesn't need to be that fast for one. I think it's going to be a world devastation for another. And why do they need to go find the God particle and mess with our world in the first place?
Well, let's, like Steve said there, let's hope that they know what they're doing. That they have some sort of idea that they're going to find something special. Steve, you got something to say there?
No, they probably don't know what they're doing, but it doesn't.
Well, let's pretend.
I don't know that it's going to be disastrous. They may actually advance science to some degree with it. I don't know. I think I'd spend money on something else.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying. It's like, just in case. Let's buy something else.
Well,
let's look into something else.
Imagine the books you could get from Amazon with that kind of money.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Oh my gosh, I would have so much fun.
Yeah,
I mean, people.
Right?
I'm not being sarcastic either. But you know what? Can you tell us how a person could get a hold of you if they have any questions or anything needing researched, perhaps?
Well, I'm on Facebook. I think if you punch in Steve Ward and maybe put on Point Pleasant, you'll find the right Steve Ward.
Okay.
I'm also, I have a podcast which has been on hiatus.
That's right.
A good 2.5 years of backlog, and I'll be starting up again, called The High Strangeness Factor on the Paranormal UK Radio Network.
Okay, we'll put that down on our website as well.
Okay. I'm also on Mac Maloney's Military X-Files as a correspondent. I usually do a fringe report.
Okay.
This August, I think it's the 4th through 6th, the Midwest Conference of the Unknown. I'll be speaking there in Cape Girardeau with people like Joshua Cutchin.
Oh,
and
wow.
and really a great list of people. And it's at the Jury Conference Center. Jury.
Okay.
And you can if you type in Midwest Conference of the Unknown, you'll find it.
Okay.
So,
without question, we'll.
And of course.
Oh, go ahead.
And of course, the Mothman Festival, 3rd weekend in September. Now it's kind of hard to get lodging sometimes, but if you message me on Facebook, I'll give you the place, a motel that would probably still have some rooms.
Oh, so that's beautiful.
I
really appreciate that.
I won't blast it out loud because it's off the grid. It's a great place. The prices are good, and the people keep it up well. So.
Oh, I would love that. Jennifer, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Not the Crazy Ghost Hotel, right?
Well, I kind of want to.
Well, that would be kind of interesting. Maybe we can get a ghost to throw something at us.
Who knows?
Well, it's It's 2 or 3 steps above the Bates Hotel, so I wouldn't worry about it.
There you go.
So, can you tell us a little bit about, now you mentioned that you're having this, you have your own podcast. Can you tell us, coming back. Can you tell us a little bit about what you talk about?
Yeah, what you discuss and things like that.
Well, I talk about a lot of the stuff we talk about now. I've had just a great list of guests. I don't need to agree with the guests, or it doesn't even have to be a specialty of mine. I have my sometimes co-host is Andy Mercer. He's a Brit from across the pond, and he's also my producer. So you don't hear my golden tones unless he produces the show. And
gotcha.
I have just talked to all kinds of people. I some really Stan Gordon has been on I spoke at the Beast of Bray Road conference. Now I had there's a lot going on Lee Hampel's farm, just bizarre UFO stuff and cryptids. I had him on, and the Bucks County paranormal people that were out there. I have some good friends that occasionally act as co-hosts. I had a lady on, Allison Jornlin, talking about the so-called Chicago Mothman, which looks kind of dubious, but she just so many. Michael Carter, who is associated with Ancient Aliens. Michael J.S. Carter, Reverend Carter. Mm-hmm. I just have had all kinds of great guests, and Linda Zimmerman talking about the triangles over New York, and I should have a list in front of me, but
right.
It sounds like an interesting show. It sounds like you have a lot of interesting guests, and
it does, and I want to take a listen.
And people know from they understand my perspective. I'm very Keelian in my approach, although we don't always talk about Keel, and I don't beat people's heads over with Keel.
Right.
So
no, I totally.
I let them have their say, you know.
Exactly. That's pretty much what we do here too, as well. You know, leave it up to the audience to make the determination. We don't say yes. We don't say no. We don't say maybe. We don't. You know what I mean? So. It's up to the audience. But I'm sorry, you may have said this, but what times will your podcast be? Dates and times? Is that?
Well, it's usually when it's up and running, it's every 2 weeks or every fortnight, and that's my
every fortnight. Perfect.
I'll see you again in a fortnight. So
excellent.
When it gets going again, it's every 2 weeks.
Every 2 weeks. Okay.
Yeah. Like I say, nothing's happening at the moment, but there's just short of 3 years of shows.
I was going to say, is there replays happening right now? Is that what you're saying?
Well, you can just go to the
archive
website. It's Podbean, but it's on all kinds of platforms. And you can just download any of the or stream any of the shows from the past.
Okay, perfect. Well, before we go, I think this is going to be the last question. Unfortunately, we're past our mark here, but we definitely would like to have you back on. I mean, this was some intriguing conversation. We have many more questions, I'm sure. But do you have anything else in store for us as far as the future goes, besides working on the museum and your book that's due out sometime before 2050 and stuff like that?
Before the next millennium.
Yes. Is there anything else anybody needs to know?
Just every once in a while, I show up on a show like this, which is always fun.
Okay. Yeah.
No, I don't think I have anything. Yes, I do.
Here we go. This is why I ask.
At the Van Meter Visitor Festival, at the very end of September, Van Meter had a strange winged creature visit back in 1903. And Chad Lewis, Noah Voss, and Kevin Nelson wrote a book called The Van Meter Visitor, and they uncovered this, and it's a great book. Anyway, I usually speak there at the festival. This year I'm going to be the master of ceremonies. So it's Van Meter is just west of Des Moines, and it's just a great little festival, and that's a lot of fun. So I will definitely be there, and I think that's about it. I'll keep it. You can come and see me At the
I'd
I
love
work
to.
weekends at the Mothman Museum. Jeff has me come in other days, other busy days.
Okay.
And it is absolutely worth the trip. And if you can ever get to the Mothman Festival, it'll be honestly, if you're into this sort of thing, it will be a high point in your
definitely.
life.
Yeah,
that's no exaggeration.
Without question, I think we have our plans for September.
Yes.
Well, we'll be heading out towards that way anyway in the month of September because we might be, we're going to be traveling to my mother's house.
Yes, Michigan, yes.
She lives in Lincoln Park. I'm sure you're familiar with.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
That's very close to Wyandotte.
That's correct. Yep. Going in that particular direction, we can keep on going and head to that and just make a big thing out of it. That sounds absolutely fun. But I don't want to keep you any longer there, my friend. But thank you once again for coming on the show, and we definitely want you to come back to Night Talks Radio.
Well, it was my pleasure, and I'll come back anytime. This is a lot of fun.
Thank you so much, Steve. Have a wonderful night.
Okay.
All right.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you again.
Yep. Bye-bye. All right. So, what now? As we always ask every show, what are your thoughts on Steve Ward? He liked to be called Steve. Steve Ward.
I think that was very intriguing, very fascinating.
Oh, indeed.
I have never heard of the Mothman before until you actually came into my life.
Really?
Yes. I mean, here we only hear about, honestly, Bigfoot.
Well, yeah, it's Bigfoot and trolls, obviously, because Norway being so huge up here.
Yes, and to tell you the truth, I've really hardly even heard about that anymore. It's kind of very well hidden or not really talked about.
Well, it's just they don't talk about it because people are automatically supposed to know about the trolls and Thief River Falls. It's a show that we could probably do another time. I plan on doing a show on folklore and things like that. So I think we'll probably be touching on that particular subject, trolls and Bigfoot in Minnesota.
See,
but go ahead.
With the Mothman, I was kind of tossing around the idea, people have said that they have seen, weird creatures like dragons. There's actually dragons out there, I guess. Could the Mothman possibly be like a gargoyle?
A gargoyle? From all the research that I've done, and, right away I'm going to say that obviously I'm not as keen as Stephen Ward on the subject, but I have done my fair share of research and investigating about the Mothman. When it really caught my interest, which was about the same time that you started learning about it, because I started talking about it so much, which was about 4 years ago, I think.
Right.
We heard it on a fellow radio show host's program, and I don't think. I mean, it's gargoyle-like, obviously, if you see the pictures of it and things of that nature.
Yes.
But to be honest, nobody really knows exactly what it looks like or resembles, besides the fact that some have said it does resemble a moth in the face. Even with, the
wings?
Not necessarily the wings, but the sort of the hairy upper back area behind its head and behind the torso. It's, what is that, proboscis? Is that what it's called? What do mosquitoes have? Their little thing that sticks into you. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh,
I can't think of that. I cannot think of that.
I just call
name.
it their stinger.
Their stinger thingy. But obviously moths don't have a stinger thingy. But he has one of those sticking out as well in some of the pictures. So that's I'm assuming that's why Mothman comes into play.
Right, but with the eyes, the red glowing eyes, do you think the eyes really glow, or do you think it was maybe more of an entertainment to say that they glow? Maybe they're so bright that when the light reflected off of them, it looked like they glow?
Well, I am not on top of this like Steven is, which, by the way, we'll put down all that information before tomorrow on our website, so you can look that up yourself and enjoy Steven's work and things that he has to say about this whole subject. But the red eyes seems to be something that goes along with the tale of the Mothman. Multiple occasions, multiple stories that I've heard of, especially the one with the farmer, and the names for escape me at this point. I'm sorry, but when the farmer's dog was barking like crazy out in the back garage area, and he thought maybe perhaps his dog was hungry,
right?
But he brought his shotgun nonetheless. And when he opened the door, the garage door, sliding garage door, he saw something that was standing by the reddish of the eyes, about 10 to 11 feet off the ground, in a sort of blinking manner. So that's just one of many sightings where people have said they've seen these very distinct reddish colored eyes. And to keep with that story just for one more second, the man immediately got out of the garage, as I probably would myself. I'd hightail it out of there. But immediately after that, the dog stopped barking and actually squealed and no longer barked. And that's when he thought something was up. But, all right, so I think that's going to wrap it up for this particular show, Episode 2, Mothman Confidential with Stephen Ward. And we had a great band as well on NTR New Music Now. That, of course, being the Darren Holland Project, who we hope to have back as well. So that's it for another NTR. We want to thank our special guest, Stephen Ward, our amazing co-host, Jennifer Gregerson, our New Music Now artists, the Darren Holland Project, the voice of NTR, Kevin Robinson, and Spreaker.com. And let's not forget Art Bell. If it wasn't for him, none of us would be around. And of course me, Daniel Brewer, saying until the next NTR, stay safe, and remember, they are listening. So long, everybody.